Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Meguri Aviv be'eretz Canaan. Yaakov dwelt in the land of his forefathers, in the land of Canaan. And we know that the name of every parsha is significant, and it gives over the content of the parsha, what the parsha is about. We should make this shir, by the way, Le'ilor Nishmas Isaac Yaroslavich. I went to the Shiva earlier this week. Special man, as you all know and knew. So I'm sure he has many better teachers on high in the better place that he's in, but nevertheless, we remember him fondly here in this earthly shir. So, the Medrash, which is brought down in the commentaries on the verse, says, Bikesh Yaakov Leishev B'Shalva. Yaakov wanted to rest in tranquility. Rashi brings this down as well. Kafatz alav rugzei shel Yosef. And the anger, so to speak, of Yosef jumped onto him. And the Medrash continues and says, Bikshu tzadikim leishev b'shalva ba'olam hazeh. The tzadikim desire to live in tranquility in this world. And Hashem says to them, Loi dayin l'tzadikim mashem mesukalem la'asad la'hoy. It's not enough for the tzaddikim, that which they're going to get in the next world. They also want to have a tranquil life in this world? No, it's not going to happen. Like we see with the troubles of Yosef. So before we get into the Medrash and what it means exactly that Yaakov wanted to live in tranquility and what's wrong with that, why did that somehow cause that he should have the trouble of Yosef? Before we get into that, first we have to understand, how does the name of the parsha fit in with the contents of the parsha? Vayeishev means he's settled. He was settled, he was good, he was fine, everything was good, everything was nice, beautiful, perfect. And that's what he wanted to do. After all the years he spent with the trouble of Esav and the trouble of Lavan, 20 years Lavan, his father-in-law, tried to trick him. Before that, he had to run away from Esav. After that, he had to deal with Esav. And then, of course, he had the trouble of Shem abducting his daughter Dinah. His wife passed away. And now he just kind of wants to take it easy. And that's how the parsha starts, Vayeishev. But that's not at all what the parsha is about. On the contrary, the parsha is about Rugzoi Shel Yosef. The parsha is about the trouble that he has as a result of Yosef. Like the very second verse talks about the fact that Yosef was 17 years old, and the whole issues that he had. He favored him, the brothers were jealous, and the different dreams, further jealousy, and finally it got so out of hand that they wanted to kill him, threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery. Yaakov was never comforted. 22 years, he was never comforted. Because as our sages say, when a person passes away, Hashem put it in the nature of this world that they're forgotten slowly, so people can move on with life. But when a person is missing, that does not apply. And Yaakov really sensed that Yosef wasn't really dead. He was just a missing person. And Yaakov never really made peace with it. So he had really the opposite of Vayeishev. Anything but Vayeishev, anything but settled. Very unsettled 20 years. And here we are naming the Parsha Vayeishev. That's question number one. Now, in some versions, the Parsha is called Vayeishev Yaakov. Some of the people who call it by name call it Vayeishev Yaakov, but A, that's not the common name. The common name is just Vayeishev. And B, even Vayeishev Yaakov does not seem to be a correct name because Yaakov wasn't really settled at all. This is question number one. Question number two, let's examine comment that Rashi says and the Medrash says. Bikesh Yaakov leisha v'shalva. Sorry. Yaakov desired to live in tranquility. Kavatz alav rugas shel Yosef. The trouble with Yosef jumped onto him. What's wrong with wanting to live in tranquility? Is there something so wrong with that? Is there something wrong with wanting to just kind of not take it easy? Obviously, Yaakov was going to take it easy. He wasn't going to be retiring. He wasn't going to be, moving to a village where he's going to play tennis and go swimming. He's going to serve Hashem. He's going to educate his family in the way of Torah and mitzvahs, to the extent that they had that in those days. Excuse me. But obviously what he meant was that he had enough tsaros. He had enough tsaros with Esav and with Lavan and with Shem and with the death in his family, and it was enough already. Hashem says, no, it's not enough. You need more tsaros. What's going on exactly? And then it says, Tzadikim mevakshim leishav b'shalva, that Tzadikim want to live in tranquility. And Hashem says, it's not enough. You have the world to come. You want also tranquility in this world? What's so terrible about wanting to live in tranquility? And if it says that Tzadikim want it, presumably, it's not a bad thing. Sorry, I'm getting interruptions here. Obviously, if tzaddikim want it, it's not a bad thing. Now, tzaddikim can also make mistakes once in a while. It happens. The Torah is full of it because the Torah does not cover up on the mistakes of the tzaddikim, because we are supposed to learn from their mistakes. Even though their mistakes are not as simple as might meet the eye, there's always something deeper to it. But still, the Torah wants us to learn from them, and the Torah does not hold back on criticizing what the tzaddikim may have done wrong, even if it was a slight mistake. But here, the language that tzaddikim, plural, want to live in tranquility, it does make it sound like it's not a issue that is problematic. Like it's not a sin. If it would be a sin, why would so many tzaddikim do it? It's like, it seems almost like a normal standard thing. This is what tzaddikim do. So we have to understand what's going on. So now one possibility is that when it says that the tzaddikim want to live in tranquility, and Yaakov wanted to live in tranquility, and the trouble with Yosef jumped upon them, it's possible. You still see me straight up? I turned my phone. Do you still see me straight up, or am I sideways now?
You're fine, Rabbi.
Excellent. Okay, so one possible understanding of this is that it's simply a kitrug. A kitrug means an accusation of the Satan. maybe it's not that there's anything wrong with wanting to live in tranquility. It's just that it brought about a accusation of the Satan. And sometimes when the Satan accuses, Hashem, so to speak, has to prove that his tzaddikim are really top level. Not that they sinned. Take, for example, the Akedah. What precipitated the test of the Akedah? That Avram had to be tested. Is he going to be willing to sacrifice his favorite son, and so on? So there's different opinions about it, but some say it had to do with the party that he made for his son. A few verses earlier, before the Akedah, it says, Vayas Avraham Mishta Gadol B'Yom Higamal as Yitzchok. Avram made a great feast on the day he weaned Yitzchok. And then a few verses later, it talks about the Akedah. And it says, Achar HaDvorim Ha'ela, after these things. So it's referring to the things that we just mentioned above. What's the connection? According to one medrash, the Satan, the accusing angel, said to Hashem, from all the delicacies that Avram prepared for this meal, he didn't provide you, Hashem, with even one sacrifice. Not even one sacrifice did he bring to you. So Hashem said, if I would ask him to sacrifice his favorite son, he would do so. And that is what precipitated the test of the Akedah, which of course Avram passed. Now, when we tell over this story, remember, there is no obligation to bring a sacrifice on the day that you wean your son. There's no such obligation. And as such, did Avram sin by not bringing a sacrifice on that day? No. He brought plenty of other sacrifices on other occasions. And this is not one that necessitates a sacrifice. It's a nice thing, but he didn't have to. So we're not going to say it's a sin. But nevertheless, once there was a kitrug, once there was a claim, a prosecutorial claim against him, Hashem had to silence the prosecutor by showing that Avram was willing to sacrifice his son. So that's fine. And maybe one could say that it's a similar thing over here. Yaakov wanted to have tranquility. And in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that. But the Satan maybe popped up and said, hey, Yaakov wants tranquility? Who says he's deserving of that? Maybe he's not so deserving. Maybe he's not so perfect. Maybe he doesn't deserve to have such an easy life. And maybe Hashem said, okay, let's test him a little bit and see how he deals with another problem. So the truth is that there is one version of the Medrash that does express the issue in that way. And it does mention that it had to do with the Satan's kitrug. I'm just going to read the language of that Medrash. The Medrash says, one version of the Medrash, HaSatan ba'u mekatrik. When the tzaddikim want to have tranquility, the Satan comes and claims. And the same thing when Yaakov wanted to have tranquility, Sitnoi shel Yosef, the prosecutorial claim of Yosef came against him. So that might explain that it's not a punishment, but yet it still is a result of him wanting to have tranquility, which brought the claim against him, which Hashem had to silence in this way. However, that is not the language of the Medrash that we have and that Rashi quotes. It doesn't say the Satan. It says Yaakov wanted tranquility, kafetz alav. It jumped on him, this problem with Yosef. And the tzaddikim want to have tranquility, and Hashem says, nothing about the Satan. Hashem says that they are, it's not enough that they have the next world and they want this world. So it seems that it's not a result of a kitrug. And therefore, we're back to the question, what is so wrong with this? that it brings about this negative result? Is it a punishment? If it's a punishment, then it's a sin for wanting to have peace and quiet. What's the sin? What's going on? So, first of all, we have to explain what it means that Yaakov wanted to have tranquility and that Tzaddikim want to have tranquility. And the idea is that what they want to do is they want to serve Hashem in the best possible way. When a person is going through troubling times and they have health issues or issues within their family, relationship issues, or financial stress, or safety, like Yaakov had, dangers, enemies, fighting, all of that. So a person does not necessarily have the head to serve Hashem, doesn't have the head space, can't concentrate. He's trying to pray to Hashem, but through his mind is running all of the difficulties that he's having. And as soon as he tries to pray about that difficulty, all of a sudden he remembers, oh, that difficulty, plus another difficulty. What am I going to do? And then he tries to think about like how to solve it. And by the time he's finished prayers, he's thought about all his difficulties. But he didn't necessarily concentrate on his prayers because he was so distracted by those difficulties. And he wants to have time to study Torah, to go to Rabbi Smith's classes. But he finds he has so many things he has to take care of, so many issues, He's not finding the time. The tzaddikim don't want tranquility because they want to take it easy. They don't want to take it easy. They want to work hard, but they want to work hard on things that are important. They would rather work hard on figuring out a verse in the Torah, page in the Talmud, a chapter in the Tanya, a Mishnah, teaching somebody something, helping somebody with something. That's what they want to work hard at. They don't want to work hard on tsaros. Now, this is, by the way, what life is going to be like when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, what are we going to do all day? Like some people are nervous, like if Mashiach comes, what we're all just going to be like learning in yeshiva all day, and that's not me, and that's not what my lifestyle is, and so on and so forth. But in fact, when Mashiach comes, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be serving God and enjoying it, studying Torah and enjoying it, doing mitzvahs and enjoying it. And it's going to bring us greater pleasure than all the pleasures we're having today. Because closeness to God, who is the source of all pleasure, is really the greatest pleasure ever. Question? Somebody has a question?
Yes. Yeah, doesn't it say regarding Eov that the Satan wanted to test him, but Hashem said that he doesn't think that Eov would be able to withstand the Satan's test, so that Hashem was going to test him personally?
No. On the contrary, Hashem let the Satan test him. That's what it says clearly in the verse of Eov.
Or maybe I had it backwards.
Hashem allowed the Satan to test him. He said, you could make him trouble with his family and his financials, but leave him alone. And then Eov passed the test. He didn't complain. And the Satan said, well, he's still healthy and he's still well, so of course he's not complaining. And the next time, next time Hashem gave permission to the Satan to afflict him bodily, but not to take his soul, to leave him alive, to make him suffer, but still remain alive. And that's when Eov couldn't handle it. and he had a lot of complaints. And it took him 42 chapters of discussions with his colleagues to finally realize that Hashem is beyond understanding and we can't complain. We don't understand. This is just the way it's supposed to be, and so on. But that is a good example, actually, of a test that came as a result of the Sultan's claim. The Sultan claimed that Iyov wasn't so righteous, that it was only because he had a good life. And if he would be tested, he would fail. And that claim is what led to all of the suffering of Iyov, which he ultimately did pass. But yeah, that's the story. So the tzaddikim who want tranquility want to have a life that's kind of like the Messianic era, when we're going to be able to simply have no worries, no financial worries, no worries from our enemies. We're going to be provided with everything. We're not going to have to go to work because the other nations are going to provide us with our needs. We're not going to have to go to war because they're all going to recognize Hashem and the Jewish people and the land of Israel. And the agriculture is going to be blessed. We're barely going to have to farm. It's going to be like amazing, but we're still going to work hard in terms of our service towards Hashem. And that's what the tzaddikim want. And Hashem says, there's a time for everything. There's a time for everything. But it's not necessarily the time. The time is not necessarily now. Insistent that they have to reach me now. Anyway, Hashem says there's a time for everything. And there will be a time when you'll be able to have tranquility. But it's not necessarily now. In fact, Yaakov did have years of tranquility. Who knows when?
When he was in Egypt.
Exactly. When he was in Egypt, he had 17 years of amazing tranquility. And by the way, in the land of Israel, he had 9 years of relative tranquility. Before the story with Yosef happened, there were 9 years that he was living in Israel in tranquility, meaning to say, all of the troubles had finished, and the troubles with Yosef hadn't started yet. He lived with his father, with his kids, with his grandkids. We don't know of any troubles. He had tranquility. But the level of tranquility that he had in Egypt was way, way higher. That was almost a messianic level of tranquility, where he was able to serve Hashem, study Torah, be with his family, with his extended family, not have any trouble whatsoever of earning a livelihood, because Yosef provided everything. And that was an amazing level of tranquility that he did eventually get. Now, here's the amazing vort that the Rebbe says. I'm sure by now you know that a vort is a concept, a new idea. Here, vort literally means a word, but that's what it's understood to mean. Here is the vort that the Rebbe says, my friends. Yaakov wanted tranquility. Hashem said, you can have tranquility. I'll give you 9 years of tranquility. But Yaakov wanted more than that. He wanted the highest level tranquility. He wanted a messianic era level tranquility. Hashem said, you know what? You want that level of tranquility, I'll give it to you. But to get to that level of tranquility, you can only come to it if you have the troubles of Yosef. You have to realize the troubles of Yosef were much more difficult for Yaakov than the troubles of Esav and Lavan. Because Esav and Lavan, those troubles were from without. They were other people. Okay, it's his brother, it's his father-in-law, but it's not within himself. The trouble with Yosef was within his family, his progeny, his favorite son, with all of the rest of his sons. And the gnawing feeling that he had all the years that maybe it wasn't a wild animal that took Yosef. Maybe the brothers were involved. So that pain was a much deeper pain, a much more difficult situation that he had to deal with for all those years, much more so than Esav and Lavan's problems. And Hashem was saying to him, you want to come to tranquility? You can come to tranquility. I'll give you tranquility. But the only way to get to tranquility is if you sort out your issues, the most painful issues, the most difficult issues. When you go through fire, when you go through brimstone, when you go through the worst suffering you can imagine, that's the only way you're going to get to the greatest level of tranquility that's imaginable. There's no other way. That's the order that this world works in. The greater the trouble, the greater the difficulty that a person goes through, that's, I'm forgetting the word, but that's the proportional amount of tranquility they'll come to afterwards. The Rebbe learns the understanding of Bikesh Yaakov Leshev Beshalva as a request. Bikesh can mean he wanted, like in his mind, he had like a little thought, I wish things would calm down. But it can also be understood as a prayer, like a bakasha, like a request. Bikesh Yaakov Leshev Beshalva. Yaakov requested, Hashem, I want tranquility. I want the highest level of tranquility you can do for me. Hashem responded and he said, yes, I will give you that tranquility. You will get that tranquility. And he got it. For the last 17 years of his life, he was living a messianic level of tranquility, of peace, of quiet, of no troubles, pure spirituality and nachas. But to get to that point, you have to go through the darkest times that you've ever gone through. Much, much worse than what you've had until now. So the name of the parsha is Vayeishev, because Vayeishev means tranquility. And the parsha is about achieving tranquility. There's not much tranquility in the parsha. All about the troubles. But what a person has to do is he has to look into the depth of the troubles and realize and come to understand that the tranquility is coming through these troubles. They're not a side point. They're not just something, by the way, we have to take care of some stuff and then the tranquility is coming. No, this is how you get to the tranquility. You get to the tranquility by working through these issues and finding Hashem's light, finding the connection to Hashem in the deepest darkness. That becomes your tranquility. You turn that into your tranquility. And I use the hostages as an example, even though, we speak about them, in so many different ways, and it's almost like passé to say like the hostages, but nevertheless, it's true that they went through days of terrible darkness, and yet now they came back with a much deeper appreciation for Hashem, for the Jewish people, for the Torah, for religion, something they never could have achieved, never would have achieved, never thought they would achieve. But it only came to them through that darkness. The previous Rebbe, David was talking about the imprisonment of the Alter Rebbe. The previous Lubavitch Rebbe was also imprisoned, also for an extended period of time. Not quite 53 days like the Alter Rebbe, but if I'm not mistaken, it was 18 days. And then he was in exile for more than a week. And he was not treated very nicely. in those days. He was beaten. He was thrown downstairs. They tried to force feed him not kosher food and so on. It was a very difficult time for him. Originally, they wanted to kill him. They wanted to execute him on the very night that he was arrested. And with Hashem's great kindness, that did not happen, as we know. And he said many years later, you know, if you would give me $1 million, I would not go back to prison for even an hour because of the great pain that I was in while I was there. But if you would give me $1 million, I also would not give away even 1 hour of my experiences that I had there because of how those experiences purified me and elevated me. So this is the story with Vayeishev Yaakov. Yaakov wanted to achieve tranquility, and Hashem said, yes, I'll give you tranquility. But it comes with trouble. From the trouble, if you pass the test, if you recognize Hashem within the trouble, you'll find a greater tranquility through that test. I don't have a perfect story to illustrate this, other than the hostages as I mentioned, and other than Yaakov and Yosef, previous Rebbe. But nevertheless, I have an interesting story that's a good story anyway. But before I tell the story, any questions, comments? No, everything's good. Okay, so I spent some time recently with Reb Herschel Smith's son, Rabbi Menachem Smith's brother, Eli Smith, my brother-in-law, because we traveled together to our mutual friend's daughter's wedding. And on the way, he told me a story that he heard from Rabbi Shlomo Chaim. Rabbi Shlomo Chaim is a Chabad emissary in the San Francisco area, the Bay Area. He himself had a lot of trouble in his life. He was ill. The doctor said he would never walk again. He got better. He's fine now. But this is not about his illness. This is about a brother-in-law of his, whose name is Chaim Aaron Levin, who was on the way to his nephews Shalom Zachar and Briss, driving from the valley in outside of LA to I think it was Pico Robertson in part of LA, where those festivities were going to happen. And he got stuck in traffic, and he had to stop driving and park the car many, many miles away. And at the Shalom Zachar, there were two different tables. There was the Chabad table, and there was the non-Chabad table, because, you know, the family had different parts, different types of Jews. And at the Chabad table, they were saying it's such a shame, Chaim Aaron is not going to make it to the bris. Feel bad for him, stuck in the middle of nowhere. And at the Chabad table, they were taking wagers as to when he would come to shul, before davening, in the middle of davening, after davening, but they were sure he would come. Anyway, he decided that he was going to come, and he had a whole plan mapped out. He was going to stop in Schwartzy's house for a cup of coffee. Shlomo Schwartz was a famous Chabad personality who did a lot of Jewish outreach, especially among the rich and famous in Hollywood, but amongst all Jews. And he was going to stop at Harry Spiegel to use his pool for a mikveh, and then he was going to go to shul, to the shul where the bris was going to be. He had it all mapped out. He walked many, many miles. Finally, he came to Schwartzy's house, and he knocks on the door, And they opened the door like they do in the dangerous neighborhoods with like a little chain so he could see through, but they didn't let him in. And he said, Shabbos, can I come in? I just want a cup of coffee. And they said, no, you can't come in. I said, why not? They said, there's a Shabbaton here, and there's 35 women here. It's an all-female Shabbaton. There's no men here, and it's just not appropriate. You can't come in. He said, okay, so at least give me a cup of coffee outside. I had this whole thing of walking so many miles to the Shalom Zachar. Just pass a cup of coffee out. I'll have a cup of coffee, please. So that they were kind enough to do. He had his cup of coffee. He went on to his next stop on the way, Harry Spiegel. He should have a Lichtig in Gan Eden. He's passed away since. Shlomo Schwartz also passed away since. Anyway, he should also have a Lichtig in Gan Eden. Anyway, Harry Spiegel said, I'm so sorry, but the pool is empty right now. There's no mikveh for you. Finally, he made his way to the shul, and he was there for the bris. And Shalom Al Yisrael, everything was fine. Anyway, so what's the story? Like, okay, that's nice. What's the lesson to be learned? So here's an interesting thing that he found out years later, and I don't even know how he found it out. But basically, there was a woman who did tshuva and became Shabbos observant and whatnot. And she told her story of how she did tshuva. And she was saying one of her big issues with Shabbos is that she's a very active person, a very outdoorsy person, and she just could not fathom how she's going to stay Shabbos in one place, and she's just going to hang out, and go to shul, and eat, and just like kind of have a sedentary lifestyle for 25 hours. And she just couldn't see herself doing that. She said, then I went to a Shabbaton at the Schwartzes, and this fellow came to the door, and he said that he walked 10 miles on Shabbos. And I was like, wow. And he's like a Hasidic Jew. If a Hasidic Jew can walk 10 miles on Shabbos, I guess Shabbos is not so bad. And maybe I should consider keeping it. And that's when something clicked in her mind, and she decided to take Shabbos more seriously. And she ended up, as I mentioned, becoming completely Shabbos observant. So the traffic and the trip and the mikveh and the coffee was all set up by Hashem in such a way that it inspired somebody who he never even met her that time. But it was all arranged by Hashem. So this is just a little story. How it connects, if it connects, I don't know. Questions, comments?
Okay.
No? Ezra, what do you say?
Interesting.
Yep.
You only find out about these things after the fact that
Yes.
that how you affected others and how what happened to you, where you think that your experience, depending on how religious you are, whether this is bashert, this is what God wanted from you, even though at that time you may have felt that you were being put on more than you expected.
Right.
So, I think in the end, when you hear those kind of stories, I think it tends to reinforce your beliefs or your belief system. So, however you want to take it.
Yeah, very good. I agree. Well said.
My mother
Okay.
was
Rabbi, my mom and group, my mom was a Schwartz girl, raised in a kosher home, and was baptized at age 59 after her parents were long gone. But my grandmother was that's my maternal grandmom was so strict that when we came over, we didn't like the strictness. And I didn't realize how important it was until I started to study Torah. That's my story.
Nice, interesting.
That's
So your
the-
mom grew up religious?
Well, the home was a kosher home. They had been in Gloversville. My grandparents came from Akameni and from
Where's that?
well,
Where's
back Russia, but it was Lithuania actually.
Interesting.
And then they ended up in the Bronx. So she was a Bronx girl, the Schwartz girls, her and a sister and a brother. But every time we went over there, my grandmother came with the bundles, and it was just a different lifestyle, you know. She was very serious about lighting the candles. When they always came early on Friday, stayed over. And now I realize how that tradition has finally, after all these years,
It came back.
came back and became an important part of my life. It's
Very
awesome.
nice. Thank you for sharing.
What's a Schwartz girl?
Her name was Sarah actually Shirley Schwartz. She was a Schwartz girl. So we were just learning about Shlomo Schwartz.
Yes. They wrote a book about him, by the way. Schwartzy, it's called. That was his nickname.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. It's a good read.
Oh gosh, I would like to. Thanks. It was amazing.
Very good. Thank you for listening.
Thank
Next
you.
week, I don't know if we have a Hanukkah break or not, but if not, I'll see you on Wednesday.
Super.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Well, good Shabbos.